Welcome back to the Work in Progress podcast. It's your favorite show on the channel. It's Question Time, hosted by me, Joseph Perry. I'm joined today by a very special person's girlfriend. Who's that? It's a Jasmine. The only reason I said that is because she's the girlfriend of my cousin Hamish, who you probably saw in about 3 episodes ago when he's talking about stoma bag. Today, the question we are discussing is, what's life like as an adopted child? So the reason I got Jasmine on for this question of all is because she is adopted. So I just want to know, like, when were you adopted, Jasmine? And let's start the discussion.
Sure, yeah. So I was adopted at about 10 months old. So there's not really much I remember in terms of, because I was a baby. So yeah, I was adopted from China, that south of China. So place called Nanchang, Jiangxi province. You can look it up if you fancy. But it's known to be quite a poor area of China. So yeah, that's where it all began, really.
Okay, so in that, so do you not? I obviously don't remember because obviously you were 9 months old. But like, do you have any like early memories of growing up at all? Not from China, like when you were adopted in the UK. Do you have any early memories in general?
Yeah, so sort of in a way that, like, it's difficult because it's kind of like my parents always brought me up telling me, so I always knew.
Okay.
There was never a moment. So I was adopted by a Western English family. They're, brunette, blue eyes, blonde, all the kind of. So I always knew, it was always a fact to me. So I don't know whether that's when I was younger, they'd tell me, oh, so, you don't look like us. But I feel like I would have, I think it's important that I got told, even though I think I would have worked it out anyway, and I would have asked at some point. Yeah. So, yeah.
Because I think it's in, I can imagine this is a very like subjective experience, adoption as a whole, because so you're speaking from your experiences, so someone else might be listening who was adopted who probably can't relate or can whatsoever. So I just want to obviously this is your personal experience of adoption. So you said you found out from birth and you would advise that. Could you imagine like that not knowing, like the typical thing in like TV when there's an adopted child, it's like in Friends or something, when like China just blurts it out. It's like a big reveal. So you're saying like it was probably better that you were told, like it was a normalized thing in the household.
Yeah, it was such a normalized thing. Like my parents always told me, and they were great in terms of like engaging with the culture. We'd always celebrate Chinese New Year. I know most Western families do, but I'm a big fat takeaway. But like, we always celebrated different things, and because my mum was so interested in the country when she had the idea about adopting, the culture's always kind of been part of my life, even though I wasn't being adopted from a Western family. But I think it's different in my circumstance in that the big reveal probably wouldn't have been as big for me because I would have worked it out. But I think it is important just so that it becomes normalized a lot quicker. And that when I started getting older and a lot more curious about it, that meant that I could have the conversation and ask questions about it. So I think it was really important in terms of just making it normal, and it always felt normal because I always knew. So.
Was there any issues, maybe perhaps like growing up at all, just out of my curiosity? Like, did you have any personal challenges or external challenges from other people, maybe making comments or anything like that?
No, not really. I wouldn't even call them challenges, but obviously people were really I think the only challenge is that my brother, who's my parents' biological son, the only obstacle I would have is just like he'd just be mistaken for my boyfriend all the time. Like, if we're out and about and they'd just be like, oh, is that your man? It's like, no, it's my brother. But so that's kind of the only one that really gets under my skin, because obviously of course people don't know, so it's fine. And like, I think because my parents always told me, it was always something that I would say very early on into getting to know a friend or getting to know someone, and explain, just so it saves them coming around my house and being like, who are these people? How would you fit in here? So yeah, I think, and I haven't really faced any you know, anyone being nasty about it or anything like that. I think the only quite recently, I think the only time it's kind of become kind of like a thing is like going into like musical theatre and drama and all that, when you're like, in the nicest way possible, because they do mean it in the nicest way, your race is really put in a box,
Mm.
where in kind of terms of castability and who you know, what kind of roles you can go up for and what roles would suit you better. So that's the only time when I really thought about it. And of course you do wonder, like, you know, normally when I achieve something or something really good, I often wonder, oh, I wonder if good old biological mum will be proud of me, or you know, it's always curious to know if I've got like a brother or a sister or stuff like that, but never like nothing negative, just the odd curiosity and the odd confusion sometimes, especially with my brother. So
Do you just mentioned biological mother? Do you have any knowledge of your biological parents?
no, none at all. So I was abandoned at like 2 days old, and I was found outside a police station, and all they had was just me wrapped up in like these clothes, and that was it. And it's really common, because obviously in China they, you know, they have the one child policy,
Mm.
so it's really common to find like abandoned babies in China, and like getting to be adopted and fostered and stuff. It's also just a money issue as well. So no, I wouldn't. I think the only way I would ever get to meet her is if she came and found me. And with all of like the political stuff going on anyway in China, it's kind of a bit difficult to yeah, to reach out.
Mm. So do you have any because that description there obviously sounds quite like extreme, like to be left outside of a police station, for example, but do you have any, this might be a personal question, but do you have any like animosity towards your biological parents at all, or is that just like something that's like they're just any other people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, because I think I live quite a charmed life at the moment, and it wouldn't have been like, God knows what my life would have been like there. You know, I'm sure, you know, it's not really worth thinking about in a way, but yeah, I guess there is a feeling of animosity because it's kind of like they, you know, my mother or father, whoever left me, clearly knew that if they left me, I'd move on to a better place, or they'd hope to move on to a better place and be loved and, you know, looked after, because they felt like they couldn't. Um, so it's all good vibes, all good feels towards them. There's nothing like, oh, how dare you left me, because actually it's kind of, you know, it's great. I can't, you know, I got the good side out of it. And of course I understand and all that, and that's from my parents always telling me about it. And you know, I think, you know, there's so many people out there who maybe might feel a little bit, you know, funny about it, but it's just the way. And because that happens a lot in China, it's almost the norm. It's kind of like, oh, okay.
Mm. Just out of curiosity, like when did you actually find out that that was how it occurred, like you were just left outside of a...
um I can't put a date on it, just because again that was the thing
Oh,
that my
okay, that
parents
was something you was told.
yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid that I got like, you know, when you're actually getting in touch with your emotions as a child, or like as you're growing up, and you're just like, oh, I'm going to feel sad about this now. Um, I think I remember one time at like the dinner table or something, I said, oh, can you tell me again? Or can you remind me? Can you tell me again? Um, so yeah, it always fired my curiosity to always know. And now it's just fact now. Like, you know, like I would say I have black hair, I would say I was adopted. It's just fact. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it, I guess. You did mention obviously that your mum had makes it the like Chinese New Year, the culture's like embraced. It's not to the full extent of maybe what you're like if you were in China, it's not to the full extent of that. So like, do you have any I want to say battles in the idea that maybe, I don't know if it's come across bad, but do you have any like battles of like you're not fully your own culture, if you're not embracing, you're
Yeah,
not fully your own culture, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess there's always that. But I think well, when I was adopted, I was also adopted at the same, like my parents went along with another set of parents who were also adopting. It was actually two girls from China who I'm actually in really good contact with. And there's actually a charity called Cash, who kind of CACH, that's kind of like, it's like a charity of families who come together and share their experience of adopting children from China. And we have like this kind of web of families that we know, and you know, girls that I know. So you know, you have those experiences to share and everything. And also going to a secondary school, that I guess when you get to secondary school, when you start getting different emotions, different feelings, different things like that. Secondary school I went to, I had a boarding house which had loads of international students from Hong Kong, that I, you know, that if I was curious, I'd always ask. I had a friend who would teach me the odd word here and there, because my motivation to try and teach myself at home was just, it's just not worth talking about. So yeah, and right now at university in second year, I'm now sharing with an international student from Hong Kong, and she's one of my best friends, and she teaches me how to cook. She actually taught me how to use chopsticks, because clearly that's not in my veins. I couldn't use them before she taught me. So yeah, she's taught me all the cuisine and all, you know, the words and everything. So you know, I do actively try and, out of interest, try and be part of it, but I don't feel like it's an absence from me. I think it's nice to, once at university, there was like this Asian Heritage Month or something, and we did something, because we're drama students and we're arty like that. But I said, oh, you know what, I'll read a poem, but I'll read it in Chinese. So the amount of evenings me and my friends spent like sat at the dinner table, like her trying to tell me how to say this, what, like to say this poem, was crazy. But afterwards I did feel, I don't know, I was like, oh, this is really strange. But yeah, you do, I've always been actively involved or wanting to know more. And I think by having, you know, others around me that know more about my culture than I obviously do, that helps a lot.
Okay, so because I see a lot on I guess Twitter. If you've listened to the show before, I bring it up a lot. People say on Twitter that there was that people being adopted outside of their culture, they can't make they portray it as a negative thing, because of the fact it's like, so say a white family adopt an African child, they people present that as like a more of a negative scenario, because you're taking that child out of their
Mm.
culture, and maybe they don't get an upbringing with it, so that changes them as a person. But then, as you're saying, you, through external people, including your parents and people you've met along the way of growing up,
Yeah.
you've managed to come across people that have, you've learned your culture in an alternative route, in a
Yeah, and you know, by my parents talking about it all the time, and my mum said, oh, it's Chinese New Year, you know, go to school, do you want to like give out like red envelopes to your friends and stuff, because obviously that's a tradition, with chocolate coins, because obviously not money, yeah. But no, it's also the kind of like, I totally get that view. But I think it's, again, I think it depends a family's circumstance, and it depends how old they are when you adopt them. That I think, because I was, you know, I was a blank canvas really when I got adopted, like, you know, so, and like, I think obviously my personality is more British than it is, you know, whatever British personality means.
mm.
Obviously, because I got brought up by a Western family, you know, I'm so like my mum, I'm so like my dad, and it's all about upbringing. And I think at the end of the day, if it's not, I don't see it as taking someone's culture away from them. I see it as kind of like trying to give them a better life somewhere else. That, you know, people who adopt don't do it to be nasty.
Mm.
They do it as for positive reasons. So, but I do understand. But I think it's up to the parents, and also maybe, you know, out of the child's choice, if they want to learn more about it, then, you know, the world's so multicultural now. It's, you know, I'd say it's easy enough to do.
You mentioned that you know of people that you got adopted at a similar time to you, you said.
Yeah.
Do they have a similar, would they like have a similar experiences to you and agree with what you're saying in
Um,
general?
yeah, I would say so. Like, so I won't name them, of course, but
Mm.
the two girls that got adopted the same time as me, um, one of the girls was born literally days before me. I speak to this girl who was born, a few days before me, like a bit, and I would say they would say similar things, just because their upbringing is so it's so different to their upbringing was literally from when they were children, like when they were like babies, toddlers, babies. Um, I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I'd like to say that they'd agree with me that it's not a matter of it could be just a matter of ignorance because we don't know any other. I might say, I'm pretty sure I might say something different if I was adopted when I was like 10 or 11, but
Mm.
because I don't know what it's like to have as a baby, you don't feel like you're pulled from your culture because you're a baby. But if you were, when you're old enough to understand that could be seen as a thing, then I guess it could be seen as an obstacle for you. But I think because we were babies, we don't know anything. So
Mm. You've said a couple of times about be like if it was 10 years later. I think that's a very fair thing to say because I did psychology in A levels, and there's a topic about like attachment types as a child. So when you
yeah,
read, it's not so much about the culture in that sense. It's about once you reach certain ages, you've missed like the prime time to attach to a primary caregiver. So as you said,
yeah,
like your mum, you were a baby, so you were able still to attach and
yeah,
form that attachment that you have now. But the if you were there when you were 10, it would have been a much harder process.
yeah. And if anything, like it's a lot. It was so much easier for me to attach when I was a baby than maybe it was for my biological mum to detach. Like I can't even imagine. But
Mm,
it's because you're a baby, you just don't know any better or any worse. Really, it just kind of happens. But it's a positive thing because clearly it was done for positive reasons.
yeah.
And yeah, I like to think it's a positive outcome. So
There's a part of every question time where I go to an external source, so like some statistics or
cool.
some facts about uh, topic and obviously about adoption. So I actually was surprised to find out that in 2019, this is in the UK, adoptions overall fell by 7%. So there's only about 3,570 adoptions. That's what when it dropped to down by 7%. There's been a sharp downward trend since 2015, and however, children in care overall has risen by 4%. So it's like a 78,750. So I think that in its own is quite not shocking but surprising, because the more so about the adoption numbers, 3,570 in 2019. I thought it'd be so much more. I thought adoption was so much more I don't know, like common, especially with like maybe possibly same-sex marriages. uh
Yeah, yeah.
I'd have thought that number would have been higher, but it's also saying it's a downward trend since 2015,
I
which is
think maybe, I mean, I'm not a stats expert or like economy expert or anything like that, but
mm,
I think it's so hard to adopt. Like it's really difficult, and it's got even harder. Like I mean, I speak to my parents today and they're like, well, if we tried to do it again, we wouldn't try again because it's so hard. They started their process in 1996 in October, and because my parents did it because they didn't think they could have children. So and then 2 years into that process, my mum fell pregnant with my brother, so that was put on hold. So I guess it's a bit of fate. If my brother hadn't come along, they wouldn't have had me. Um, and then 2 years after that, so I think it was something like 4 years and 4 months later, with
jeez.
obviously with my brother interfering, as I like to say, interfering with their plans. Yeah, it's a long process, and I would say with my brother probably only took a few months out of that because my parents wrote me diaries. So from the start of their adoption process to about when I was 4, they wrote diaries like every day of like, oh, we met with a solicitor today, we signed off this form. There's like medical forms, police reports, and they have to have a social worker to like interview mum and dad separately, ask, really dig into their past.
Mm,
So it's really difficult, and I think it's not for the faint-hearted. So um it could be to do with like a matter of choice, that it is a long process, and there's a lot of money involved as well to like get yourself a solicitor and send papers to and from China to get them translated and stuff. And then there's the flights to go to China, and it's the hotels, and it's not cheap.
mm,
And it's not, you can't just say, oh, I want to adopt, and 6 months later you have a child in your arms. It's so much more difficult than that. And like my poor parents, like they went through a lot, like to try and get me. And yeah, I think it's a lot harder, especially for like other countries as well. I'm not really sure what it's like, adopting within a country, but I would say it's just as difficult
Yeah.
because of the amount of digging, rightly, social workers need to do, to make sure they go to a good family. So, but I'd like to think they rise a little bit with all these same-sex marriages, and the world becoming a lot more open towards that kind of thing. But it it literally is, it's not easy. So it didn't surprise me in terms, especially with different countries like tightening their political views and immigration things and stuff like that. It's not just kind of like our country, it's other countries tightening their rules and tightening their requirements and stuff, which that halfway through a process, I'm not surprised if some people would just give up, because it's difficult.
Mm.
So.
You said there a bit before about how your parents were a dad. I think that's really good. Like, it's showing the extent of how I don't know. It seems like that's a good thing to do to help you, maybe your understanding at a young age, because you literally could just read the process. I think
Yeah,
that's really cool.
and like I read them when I could like read and understand. My mum sat down and like read them to me. And then obviously like last night when I was just sorting up a little bit, I read them through again, and it's a really nice touch. I think even if you're not adopted, even if you're just a normal kid, I think
Yeah.
it's lovely to keep diaries and keep stuff like that, and especially with all of the information that I'd forgotten that they needed to like give to different people and stuff. I think it's nice. And there was a page where my mum wrote, "Oh, today I found out that you're going to have a baby brother or sister," and then they put, "Oh no, but we still love you and we still want to carry on the process." It wasn't like an end diary entry.
Yeah.
It was like, "Oh no, we still love you. We put so much effort. We still want to do it." And then it's just humorous entries as well. So like, "Oh, you came home today, first day as a family. Peter's still not sure about you," and stuff like. I mean, he's still not sure now, but yeah. It's I think it's a lovely touch, especially to kind of really know what they went through, because really it's kind of my experience growing up, but it's their experience adopting.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they've made my experience growing up so easy by just I think just the plain fact of me knowing and always knowing.
I think
Yeah.
overall, like I've got a much better understanding of maybe your experience of it. Obviously, again, um it's not an objective experience; it's subjective. So some people might not be able to relate. Um, I'm just curious: is there anything in particular you want to say before we conclude?
um I'm not sure.
Because
I think
I was gonna ask like if you were on the if you were to speak to someone that was possibly on the fence of adopting, from the perspective of someone that was adopted, what would you possibly say to them?
I was gonna say do it, they turn out great. um no, it's I think if you're doing it for the right reasons, and in order to make another child's life happy, and for you to fulfill your life in terms of wanting to look after someone and knowing you can give them a better home, I think do it. If you've got the persistence and you've got the drive to want to help some way, then I'd say do it. It's not easy, but I think, again, because I was adopted as a child, I was as difficult bringing up as like my biological brother.
Mm.
Like because obviously if you adopted someone age 10 or as a teenager, obviously it might be a bit more difficult. But I would say that it's always going to be difficult, however, whichever point you look at it. So yeah, do it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to promote it, is if you're doing it for the right reasons. It shouldn't matter where they're like culture wise, where they're from, as long as they get that child is getting a better upbringing than they would have,
Yeah, I
vice
think
versa.
that's the most important thing, that every parent wants their best for their kid. And I think if you understand children need the care and love that they need,
Mm.
that I don't I see my mum and dad now as literally like my mum and dad. Like they're not my adoptive parents. They're
Yeah.
literally just mum and dad to me, and my brother's just my brother. Um, yeah, so it's not, you know, it's I don't see it as like taking a child away from someone's culture, because I think it's more about doing what's best for them and like helping them out and doing something positive and doing something good. The culture thing I think would come later.
Yeah.
Then I think it's the parents' duty to try and ask them if they want to be open to it, and
Mm.
then it's up to them at the end of the day.
I mean, I think that was a good little chat.
Yeah, it's a good chat.
uh, yeah, I'm happy to conclude it there. So I'll just, if you wanna, do you wanna shout out your Instagram possibly? Because Hamish didn't do it, but if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, you can follow me at Jasmine Lilybays on Instagram. I do have a Twitter, but I can't remember my handle. But it's something similar. Yeah, so if you want to give me a follow, then sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Make sure to listen to previous shows and the future ones. Yeah, thanks for the chat, Jasmine, and thank you for watching.